The prosecutor's voice cut through the courtroom like ice. "Your Honor, we caught the defendant trespassing in a downtown parking structure," she announced without a trace of sympathy. Security asked him to leave multiple times, but he refused. To go. The man sitting at the defendant's table kept his eyes down, speaking so quietly his words barely reached the judge's ears. "I just needed somewhere warm to get through the night." Light laughter echoed from the spectator section, though the judge wasn't amused, not after hearing the defendant's name. Who was this individual? And what made the judge freeze instantly, staring at the accused as if he'd seen a spirit from his past? But before we continue with this incredible tale, make sure to smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling us where you're tuning in from. Could it be somewhere close to where this arrest happened? At 68 years old, Clarence Boone had become invisible on the streets of St. Louis, Missouri. Without a permanent home or possessions beyond the worn canvas bag he carried, decorated with faded police patches bleached by countless days in the sun, most downtown residents recognized him as the silent figure, a person who never asked for money, never caused disturbances, and never made a fuss. He would simply materialize and vanish like fleeting shadows between buildings, gathering bottles or browsing abandoned newspapers on park benches. Very few realized he had once carried a badge. Clarence had dedicated nearly 30 years to the St. Louis Police Department. Starting in 1981, he became one of the pioneering black officers assigned to the North Patrol Division. Throughout his career, he handled narcotics cases, homicide investigations, and eventually earned his detective rank. Colleagues knew him as someone fair-minded, steady under stress, and deeply committed to protecting his community, particularly the black neighborhoods the city frequently overlooked. Everything changed when his wife Lena passed away in 2010 following surgical complications that the city's healthcare system was slow to approve. Clarence's world crumbled. His sorrow was silent but crushing. He distanced himself from coworkers, took early retirement, and stopped attending department gatherings. A clerical mistake during a pension system reorganization led to his benefits being terminated. Clarence never challenged it. He simply faded away. On a freezing January morning, with winds slicing through the city like razor blades, Clarence had taken refuge on parking level B2 of the structure at 10th and Pine. This wasn't his first time there. The security officer had encountered him previously, always courteous, always departing when requested. But this particular time, Clarence remained still. He was too frozen, too exhausted. He just needed to rest. "Sir, you can't sleep in this area," the guard repeated, his tone becoming firmer. "I'm not looking to make trouble," Clarence responded from under an old military surplus blanket. "Just trying to survive until sunrise." However, the property owner had grown tired of the complaints. Law enforcement was contacted. 2 officers responded within minutes. The younger officer, Deacon, paused when he noticed Clarence's dog tags and the weathered police patch on his bag. "Sir," he inquired gently, "were you on the force?" Clarence nodded slightly. "Years ago?" Officer Deacon hesitated, but procedure was clear. "I'm sorry. They're filing charges." At the station, Clarence went through standard misdemeanor processing: fingerprinting, booking photo, basic questioning. A public defender took his case, an overwhelmed attorney managing dozens of files. "Just accept a plea deal," he suggested without making eye contact. "It's a minor charge, maybe a week in lockup." Clarence remained silent and agreed. The following morning found him in Division 13 of the St. Louis Municipal Court. His hair was messy, his jacket still wet from the previous night. No relatives sat in the gallery, no companions, just clerks, a few reporters taking notes on unrelated matters, and the weary machinery of justice grinding on. Case number 23-0581, State of Missouri versus Clarence Boone, the clerk announced. The prosecutor, barely 30, stood to address the court. "Your Honor, we found the defendant sleeping in a prohibited zone. He has previous citations for loitering and trespassing. Given his repeat violations and lack of permanent residence, we ask for continued custody pending trial." Judge Ernest, Malden hardly looked up. Recognized for his harsh words and strict decisions, he seldom showed mercy to habitual offenders. He opened the file, pen ready. "Mr. Boone, what's your plea?" Clarence rose slowly. His voice was rough. "Guilty, Your Honor. I just needed shelter from the cold." Quiet chuckling came from the back of the courtroom. Judge Malden glared toward the gallery and silence returned. Then, as he looked back at the folder before him, his pen stopped moving. He adjusted his reading glasses. "Clarence James Boone," he read aloud. Something sparked in his expression. He read it again, then looked up intently. The courtroom grew still. Without explanation, Judge Malden rose to his feet. This small but significant gesture sent confusion rippling through the room. Judges don't stand during routine proceedings. Court officers exchanged glances. The judge's knuckles went white as he gripped the bench. "This court will recess for 15 minutes, he declared abruptly. "The defendant stays put." Clarence didn't react. His expression showed no surprise, no relief. For someone like him, interruptions and delays were simply part of life's pattern. In his private chambers, Judge Malden opened the bottom drawer of an old file cabinet. Inside sat a shoebox containing mementos from his police academy days, rookie photographs, badges, yellowed instructor notes. He retrieved a folded picture, a graduation photo from the 1980s. There he stood, young and anxious in his white dress, uniform. Behind him was a black officer with a confident smile and a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Clarence Boone." "Boone," he whispered. "You were my training officer." Malden collapsed into his chair, breathing heavily. For years he'd remembered that name, that calm voice that had guided him through his first domestic violence call, through his first murder scene. Boone hadn't just been a mentor, he'd been his moral compass, and now he stood in a courtroom, facing charges for trying to survive the bitter cold. Malden grabbed the phone. "Connect me with Deputy Chief Janet Raymond," he said, "and someone from the pension department immediately." When court resumed that morning, Clarence Boone returned looking different. Someone had provided him with fresh clothing, a pressed white shirt, tan pants, and decent sneakers. His hair was neat, his beard trimmed. He didn't smile. He rarely did, but he carried himself taller, more alert. At the front of the courtroom, seated behind the prosecution table, was a woman in a crisp navy blue uniform. Her face seemed familiar. It took him a moment to recognize her. Time had changed features he hadn't seen in decades. Janet Raymond, once a rookie officer, now deputy chief of the St. Louis Police Department. Clarence studied her quietly. She gave him a small nod, her eyes growing gentle. He clutched the strap of his weathered canvas bag. Inside, protected in a plastic sandwich bag, was a photograph of his wife, Lena. He'd carried it through every season, every street corner, every night spent beneath overpasses and in stairwells. The courtroom was packed, unexpectedly so. Yesterday, there had been empty seats and indifferent looks. Today the gallery overflowed with retired officers in civilian clothes, with weathered hands and straight postures, young recruits, law students, journalists and others, neighbors, city employees, a few people from shelters who knew him only as Mr. Boone from park benches and sidewalks. They'd gathered because something about the sudden shift in this minor case had captured the city's imagination. "Before we address the formal charges," Judge Malden began, his tone more measured and deliberate than usual, "this court will hear testimony regarding the defendant's background, which may be relevant to the court's decision." The silence was profound. Even the rustling of papers ceased. Deputy Chief Janet Raymond stood and approached the witness stand. Her voice, sharpened by years of leadership, carried with practiced authority. "I'm Janet Raymond, currently serving as Deputy Chief of Police for St. Louis. I first encountered Clarence Boone in 1998 when I was a rookie under his training supervision." She paused, looking toward Clarence. "He was the first person to show me that community policing meant more than patrolling a route. It meant truly listening. It meant being there for people even when the uniform came off. I watched him talk, A suicidal teenager off a rooftop for over 2 hours without pulling his weapon. I saw him purchase food for a homeless veteran rather than chase him away. He showed me how to treat every individual, regardless of their circumstances, with respect. Raymond passed a folder to the court clerk, then faced the judge again. After reviewing his service records and personnel files, we uncovered a serious administrative mistake. In 2010, during a citywide pension system restructuring, Mr. Boone's retirement benefits were suspended due to an incorrect address in the system. When mail was returned as undeliverable, the system marked his account as inactive and payment stopped permanently. A stunned silence fell over the courtroom. He's owed over $300,000 in back pension payments, medical benefits, and cost of living. Adjustments. He never complained, never filed an appeal. He simply disappeared from our records. Judge Malden leaned forward, his expression tight. Raymond continued, her voice growing emotional. Additionally, we've gathered statements from former officers who worked with Mr. Boone, Captain Eric Navarro, Lieutenant Linwood Chase, and several others. They documented acts of courage and compassion, including the 1992 Southside chemical plant hostage crisis, where Mr. Boone single-handedly negotiated the release of a woman and child without any casualties. He never sought recognition. He simply did his job. She turned once more toward Clarence. He didn't just serve this city. He helped shape it. Clarence stood motionless, staring at a crack in the courtroom floor. His hand shook slightly. "Mr. Boone," Judge Malden called, "please approach the bench." Clarence walked forward slowly but steadily. The judge removed his glasses and placed them on his desk. "You might not recall me," he said, "but in 1987 you were assigned to train a rookie officer who was more terrified of the paperwork than the streets." He offered a small, weary smile. "That rookie was me." Clarence blinked, then chuckled quietly, a dry, unused sound. "You were the one who spilled coffee all over the dashboard on your first patrol," he said, his voice rough from lack of use. Malden laughed softly. "That was me." The room relaxed slightly. "I became a judge because I wanted to keep serving. But you, Mr. Boone, you laid the groundwork for that. You didn't just teach me how to wear the uniform. You taught me how to honor it." He turned to the young prosecutor standing uncertainly. "Given this testimony," Malden said, "does the state wish to continue with these charges?" The prosecutor swallowed hard. "Your Honor, the state moves to dismiss all charges against Mr. Boone with prejudice." "So ordered," the judge replied. "Mr. Boone, you're free to go. On behalf of this court and this city, I extend our sincere apologies." Clarence didn't move initially. It took several seconds for the words to register. When the bailiff stepped forward to release him, Clarence looked down at his wrists, at the handcuffs that had cut into skin too fragile to resist, then looked up. From the gallery, a woman stood, mid-40s with curly hair, tears already flowing. "Uncle Clarence!" she called out. He turned. "It's me, Tasha, Lena's niece. We've been searching for you for years." She crossed the room and embraced him before he could respond. It was the first gentle human contact he'd experienced in over a decade. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but Clarence walked past them. Raymond approached with a warm smile. "We're coordinating with the pension board. You'll receive every penny owed. But there's something else." She paused. "We'd like you to return to the department, not as an officer but as a mentor. These young people graduating from the academy need someone like you." Clarence took a deep breath, the kind he hadn't drawn in years. "I'm not sure how much I have left to offer," he said. Raymond's smile widened. "Even 5 minutes of your experience could transform someone's life." That afternoon, the story exploded nationwide. Homeless former cop discovered living on streets after pension error, the headlines proclaimed. Video clips from the courtroom spread across social media, gaining millions of views. In comment sections, people shared stories of forgotten veterans, overlooked public servants, and the quiet dignity of those who slipped through society's cracks. By evening, a local charity had arranged a temporary apartment for Clarence in Midtown. It wasn't spacious or fancy, but it had heat, running water, and a bed with fresh sheets. He walked through it carefully, touching the walls as if afraid it might disappear. He placed Lena's photograph on the nightstand. For the first time in 15 years, he slept in a bed instead of on concrete. And that night, in a room with a secure door and a functioning heater, Clarence Boone dreamed not of loss, but of new beginnings. Over the following days, Clarence Boone's name spread throughout St. Louis like the sound of church bells, steady, resonant, impossible to ignore. His story traveled quickly. Local news anchors began their evening broadcasts with updates on the once-forgotten man, now celebrated as a symbol of honor, lost and recovered. Radio talk shows buzzed with veterans sharing their own experiences of missed benefits and failing systems. In neighborhoods where he once walked his beat, residents placed candles in windows and posted signs reading, "We remember Officer Boone." Photographs of him in uniform, young and proud, now circulated on social media alongside heartbreaking images of him huddled beneath an overpass during Missouri's harsh winter. The stark contrast broke hearts, sparked outrage, and raised urgent questions in City Hall about how many others shared his fate, how many more had vanished in silence. Clarence, however, remained remarkably reserved in the days that followed. He'd never sought the spotlight, and now that it found him, he accepted it with reluctant grace. When city officials proposed a public recognition ceremony, he initially declined. "I'm not interested in a parade," he told Tasha one evening as they sat in his temporary apartment. "I just wanted somewhere to sleep without having to justify myself." But Tasha, determined and protective, squeezed his hand. "Uncle Clarence, this has grown beyond just you. Your presence, letting people see you, it has meaning. Not everyone gets a second opportunity to speak for those who have no voice." He nodded slowly and agreed. 1 week later, beneath the soaring ceilings of the historic Sheldon Concert Hall, Clarence stood on stage wearing a navy blue suit custom-tailored by a local veteran outreach program. His detective badge gleamed, and his military honors were carefully arranged on his lapel. The room fell silent as he approached the microphone. The audience included officers past and present, city leaders, faith leaders, veterans, and dozens of new recruits from the police academy. Mayor Lorraine Fields delivered an emotional tribute. When Judge Ernest Malden took the podium to speak, the entire audience rose in applause before he uttered a word. "I stand here today because a man chose to support me when I couldn't support myself," Malden said, his voice thick with emotion. "That man is Clarence Boone." When Clarence's turn came, he didn't speak at length. His voice was steady but unrefined, the voice of someone who hadn't addressed a crowd in years. "I don't want your sympathy," he began, looking directly at the young cadets in the front row. "I want your focus. I want you to remember that the badge you wear doesn't make you superior to anyone. If you ever forget that, you'll start forgetting the people you're supposed to serve." He paused, then added, "I once wore that badge, then I walked these streets without it. I've been treated like a hero, and I've been treated like I was invisible. The truth is, I was the same person both times." That speech was broadcast on every local channel and quoted in national media. Overnight, Clarence Boone transcended being just a news story. He became a mirror reflecting a truth too long ignored. In response, the city council acted quickly. Within 2 weeks, they passed a resolution creating the Boone Initiative, a collaborative effort between the police department, Department of Human Services, and veteran organizations to locate and assist former first responders and veterans whose benefits had been cut or lost. The program provided emergency housing, legal assistance, and case management to prevent what happened to Clarence from recurring. In just 6 months, it had restored benefits to over 35 individuals. Clarence participated in nearly every intake session, shaking hands, listening quietly, and simply being present. He turned down most interview requests, but agreed to appear at community forums and recruit graduations. He spoke not about heroism, but about dignity, about what it meant to be invisible in a city he once protected. "You can't measure someone's value by their appearance," he told one graduating class. "Sometimes the person sleeping on the sidewalk once taught someone how to save a life." Clarence relocated to a newly built veterans housing complex near Lafayette Park. It wasn't large, but it was warm, safe, and his own. Gradually, he began decorating the walls with photos of Lena from their younger days, a framed copy of his academy graduation, and a picture of him at a community event standing beside Mayor Fields and Deputy Chief Raymond. But the centerpiece of his living room was simpler, a black and white photo of a young boy smiling shyly next to a patrol car with a thank you note scribbled beneath in crayon. "Officer Boone helped me find my dog. He didn't yell. He just listened." On the first crisp morning of October, Clarence returned to the courthouse bench, where months earlier he had waited for a judge to sentence him for trespassing. He sat quietly, sipping coffee from a foam cup, watching people pass by. A young mother approached with her son in tow. The boy looked up and tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, isn't that the man from the video?" She smiled and nodded to Clarence. "Thank you for everything, sir," she said. He simply touched his cap. Letters continued arriving. One from a former cadet who had left the force after developing PTSD, saying he had felt ashamed until he saw Clarence's story. Another from a woman whose father had been a firefighter who died alone. "Your story gave me hope," she wrote. "You were lost, but you were found." That winter, Clarence received the Director's Distinguished Public Service Award from the Department of Justice, an honor rarely given to civilians. The official citation called him a model of service, humility, and resilience. The award came with a personal note: "Your silence has spoken louder than our laws. Thank you for reminding us whom we serve." On Veterans Day, Clarence stood before a crowd at Fort Leonard,